This morning, we're continuing our series on Mark, where we've kind of decided where from the beginning of the year all the way up until Easter, we're walking through the entire book of Mark, chapter by chapter and verse by verse. And we've kind of broken it into three different sections that we're walking through. The first section was on foundations, kind of like the foundations of our faith. This section we're in right now, that we started last week, is around the ministry of Jesus. You know, like, what did he do? And when we say ministry is just really speaking about the work of Jesus. Like, what did he do? Like, what was the life of Jesus like? And as he went, like, so ministry followed. And today we're talking about Mark 5. Mark chapter 5. So if you got your Bible with you, go ahead and pull it out. We're going to go right through Mark chapter 5 today, all the way through. So feel free to pull that out and follow along. We decided to title today, Jesus' Power Over Darkness and Disease. And I feel like a lot of times we can get ourselves in this headspace where the things we're reading in the Bible are kind of just a story to us. You know, and I don't want to, like, fault anyone for this, because I think it's a pretty normal thing to get lulled into. Like, when you're watching James Bond, right, like a James Bond movie. Anybody seen a James Bond movie in their life? Probably all of us, right, at some point. In your head, that's a character. It's a dude going through things that are crazy situations. Like, oh, wow, that's incredible. And, like, you can remember moments, and maybe a movie makes you feel things or something like that. But you're like, that's not a real guy. Like, no dude is, like, jumping off a building like that or sliding on the side of something or any of the stuff that he goes through, or that person, and insert your favorite movie here, right? Like, it's easy to just be like, oh, well, he can do anything, right? You just conceptualize that. But I think it's dangerous sometimes when we take that same framework and apply it to the Bible, because we start to think these are just stories, right? If you have young kids, you know, you, like, read books to them at night before they go to bed. You just all these stories that are run through your head. And stories are a good thing. I think it's part of how we work out our faith. It's part of how we understand things. But I think it's really important. For us to remember that these are not just, like, stories. These are real people. These are real people who encountered a real Jesus. Like, our Bible is not meant to just be this fairy tale that we read to get some platitudes and to understand a little bit more about how to live our life. Like, no, these are real people who experience a real Jesus. And we have the ability to kind of take away from that how we are to live in this life. And today, we're going to see in this section of Mark, there's a ton of impossible situations. There's actually three stories we're going to look at today. And they're straight up, like, impossible situations, right? We talked about, I mentioned how this is about Jesus' power over darkness and over disease. Like, we're seeing some stuff today in this section. And I think we've all experienced impossible situations. I think that's part of just the human condition. Like, you walk through stuff in life. You have seasons, right, that you go through. And some more than others. So maybe it's a health thing. Maybe it's a finance thing. Maybe it's a relationship thing. I don't know. You've encountered an impossible situation before. And what we'll see today, what I want you to walk away with, is that when we invite Jesus into those impossible situations that we walk through in life, what we see is, one, we see Jesus demonstrate his power. We see him proclaim his glory as a result of that. And then ultimately, what we experience is a rewriting of our story. And in each of these three moments that we walk through today, we're going to see that. And the point is these impossible situations we walk through in life, it's important to remember that there's no situation that's too far gone or, like, too broken or too hopeless for Jesus to step into. It's very easy to say that. It's a lot harder to live that. You know what I mean? I think sometimes just normal life can feel impossible. And we've been in lots of those situations. You felt hopeless. You felt limited. You felt constrained. You felt like there's something you can't just, like, walk through yourself, you know? I think it's a very normal thing that we experience in life. Like, for you right now, think of that impossible situation. Maybe you're in it right now. I don't know. Maybe it's something you walked through before. Maybe it's something you see on the horizon that you keep putting off because you don't want to think about it. Like, is it, like I said, is it a family relationship? Is it someone with work? I don't know. Like, keep that in mind as we're walking through today. Where do you feel stuck, or where do you feel hopeless? Like, right now, where are those things in your life? Keep that in your mind as we're walking through this, because what we're about to see is we're about to walk through three stories of three real people who were in absolutely impossible, very different, but absolutely impossible situations, and what happens when they encounter Jesus as a result. So again, we're in Mark 5 today, so open up your Bibles. We're going to start in verse 1. And this first story is about a demon-possessed man. We're starting out chill today, right? And this guy is this is something I don't think we really can visualize today, because it's not enough to be like, oh, this is a person who's down on their luck or having a hard time. No, let's take a look at where we find this guy. This is in verse 1. So they, Jesus and the disciples, arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes, where when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came up from the tombs to meet him. So this is a dude who's like not living in a great place. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained. Let's stop there for a second. This is a guy who's like living in a graveyard, like straight up living in a graveyard in the tombs. He is like outside the city. You can't be here. Why? Because he could no longer be restrained even with a chain. This is not normal. This is supernatural. You with me? Whenever he was put in chains and shackles, as he often was, keeps going, he snapped the freaking chains from his wrists and he smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. He was a danger to others, but keeps going, because he's not just a danger to others, he's a danger to himself, because day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. And when Jesus was still some way off in the distance, watch what happens here, because we can realize this is not, like I said, not a normal situation. This is not just a dude who's unwell. Y'all with me? This is a dude who is, what we come to find out, possessed by demons. Like there's demons who are ruining and infesting his body. Okay? That's why he has a supernatural strength. That's why he's been put completely away from people, because they don't want him near them at all. But as Jesus encounters him, even when he's a long way off, that guy saw him and runs to meet him and bowed low before him. And with a shriek, the guy said, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me?" This is the demon speaking through the man. "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." Let's stay here for a second. The demon encounters Jesus through this man. But what's interesting is Jesus didn't have to be like, "I am Jesus, get out of here." Like, he's a way long way off. The demon recognizes him, runs to him, bows low, remember that part? And he says, "Jesus, Son of the Most High God," recognizes exactly who he is. "In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." He recognizes exactly who Jesus is in this moment. The reason he recognizes is because Jesus has all authority over all evil. I think that's important for us to understand, because in our minds, and especially in our society, we'll see like there's a battle between light and dark. Y'all with me? Good and evil, there's a battle. That was not a battle. That was submission. Do you see that? When it's about Jesus encountering evil in darkness, there is no fight. Do you see that? There is complete and total victory. That's what you just saw. Jesus didn't have to say his name, and the evil one understood the situation. Y'all with me? Like, we got to get this. This is important to understand, because it's not about a fight between good and evil. In some situations, yes, there are, but there was a response without even a word, not a hesitation, not a question, because Jesus has authority over all evil. And sometimes I feel like we live our lives hoping Jesus can overcome this darkness in our life, hoping Jesus can overcome this anxiety I've encountered, or this whatever. And if you've ever encountered like a dark spirit or something like that, like a real manifestation of it, you're like, "Oh, I hope it could be." No. It recognizes the authority of Jesus, because he has authority over all those things. And there's a brief back and forth between the demon and Jesus, and there's kind of like this negotiation, which leads us to verse 10, which is where kind of Jesus interacts here. So in verse 10 he says, then the evil spirits begged again and again to not send them some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on a hillside nearby. The demon said, "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. See that? They couldn't just do whatever they wanted to, because Jesus had what? Authority. He gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside and into the lake and drowned in the water. This is not like a little group of pigs. Can you visualize 2,000 pigs? That's a lot of livestock. So, this is not some just random kind of herding of animals. Like, this is an intentional, like, livestock. Like, this is the livelihood of some people. Like, some herdsmen were, like, managing that. That's, like, property, right? It was probably sustenance for a local culture as well, like food, right? So this was like a resource that was being destroyed because of the infestation of these demons being moved over there. So it continues on here, and here's what happens. The herdsmen who were responsible for those pigs fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. This is a big deal, especially in like a small town like this. Like, this is a big thing that happened, right? So it keeps going. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who they had known as the dude like we have to tie up and anchor down with chains because he breaks them all the time and he hurts everybody. They see that guy. That's who they know, right? They see the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane. And what was their response? They were all afraid. What? Keeps going. Then those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and to leave them alone. It was too much. Like, it was just too much for them. Jesus has the power to free us from what holds us captive. That's what we're seeing with this man. To put it another way, when chaos meets Jesus, peace enters in. Jesus encounters this man who is nothing but chaos. And as a result, he experiences peace. Like, the guy's sitting there. He's back together. Like, he was a mess, and now he's back together. We've all battled chaos at one point in our lives. When we invite Jesus into that chaos, not I'll clean it up and then I'll come to Jesus. Does that feel familiar to anybody else? I got to get my stuff together and then I'll come to Jesus. That's a very normal response. That's not how Jesus works. We invite Jesus into that chaos, and he produces peace as a result. So they ask him to go away because they can't even handle what's going on here. So it continues in verse 18, and we'll see a little bit more about what Jesus is trying to do in this situation with this man. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. But Jesus said, no. Go home to your family, tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he's been. Let's stay here for a second. The guy's like, I can't stay here. Like, they've seen too much of my ugly. Like, I can't be here anymore. I can't live. They're not going to let me be. And Jesus, instead of being like, oh yeah, come along. It's okay. Come on. You can be with us. We're good. We'll treat you right. We know where you're going. We don't care about your past. You're fine here. He could have done that. Like, just come along with us. He said, no, you need to stay here. Well, why? Because of this. So the man started off to visit the 10 towns in that region. So he went out from that space and began to proclaim the great things that Jesus had done for him. He told his story. And as a result, everyone was amazed at what he told them. Jesus gave freedom. When Jesus comes into our chaos, he brings freedom from fear, from addiction, from sin, from worry, from anxiety, from the thing that you're dreading to deal with. Jesus brings freedom. Full stop. He brings freedom. He brings peace. That's what this man experienced. That was the result of his encounter with Jesus. That's available for you right now. It's available for me right now. The things that feel too heavy or too difficult to process through, Jesus brings freedom. Because this isn't just a story about this dude, this guy from a long time ago. This isn't just a story. This is a real person who experienced this. But this is also a story about all of us. I might not have been chained to a rock because I was too crazy because I was demon-possessed. I don't know what that's like. But I do know what it's like to be overwhelmed and feel like I can't get out from under what's pressing me down. I know what that feels like. And I also know what it looks like and what it feels like to experience the freedom that Jesus brings us. But it wasn't enough for this guy. Because it wasn't enough for Jesus to just be like, here, he can breathe again. He can be himself again. What a relief. It wasn't just about that. Because Jesus didn't just come to bring peace. He came to give this man a purpose. It's not enough to be okay again. We are meant to walk and to be and to fulfill a purpose. Look at Adam and Eve. God didn't create Adam and Eve and just be like, enjoy, chill, it's going to be good. They had a purpose. When we walk through a season that's difficult and hard and we experience freedom from that because Jesus has come in and restored us, he's given us peace, we get that freedom. We're not just meant to go, awesome, great, cool, back to watching Law and Order. I don't know. We're not meant to just sit in that. We're meant to walk in purpose. Do you see that? This man wasn't just meant to come along and be part of the crew. He said, no. Because these people around here know who you are, they're going to get this. They've seen you tied to the rock. They've heard stories of the dude who lives in the graveyard. And they're like, that's that guy? Do you see how powerful this is? He didn't come to just bring peace. He came to bring purpose. That's the first story. The next story is kind of wedged in the middle of the third one we're going to talk about, but that'll make sense later when we come back to it. The second story we're going to talk about today is about the woman with faith, and this is starting in Mark 25. And this one has stuck with me all week. I keep coming back to this one, especially right at the end, because I think this is so powerful for each and every one of us, beyond what happens to her, but more about what becomes of her. So in verse 25, we see this. There's a woman in the crowd. Now, so he leaves that place. Remember, he got in the boat and he left. So we're going to see in a minute, he gets off the boat. There's a bunch of people who crowd around him like a big old, they want to follow him. That's where we are now. So he's walking. This woman's in the crowd with him. We together? Okay, cool. So, woman in the crowd, she suffered for 12 years. She was sick for 12 years. Like medieval, like back in the olden times hurting. Y'all with me? This is a different kind of like, oh, my ankle kind of hurts. No, she's like in a bad place. She has constant bleeding. She has suffered a great deal from many doctors. She suffered from doctors, y'all. Are you with me? She suffered a great deal from many doctors. And over the years, she had spent everything, every nickel, every dime, everything she had to pay them. But she had gotten no better. In fact, she's gotten worse. 1, she's sick. 2, for 12 freaking years. 3, she suffered from doctors who have obviously taken advantage of this woman, because in this time period, a woman, especially a woman who is on their own, did not get a lot of, they weren't very well taken care of. A lot of times, they were taking advantage of us. Like in this situation, these doctors took advantage. They took every penny from her. And not only that, she's not gotten better. She's only gotten worse. In a word, this woman is desperate. I think that's familiar to a lot of us as well. You've probably felt desperate at some point. And if not you, then someone close to you. Where have you been desperate for help? Like every corner you turn is a shut door or a non-answer, or go talk to this person or whatever it might be. Like you've experienced that desperation. And what I'm sensing from this person as I'm reading, what I'm understanding about this woman is that she wasn't just desperate for help. She was desperate to know she mattered. Because these people who were meant to take care of her are taking advantage of her. They're taking all of her money. She is lost. She is desperate. You know what that feels like. She's desperate. But it continues in verse 27 here. She had heard about Jesus. Just heard tale of. People are talking. She just heard about Jesus. And as a result of just understanding of what he might be able to do, she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, no, she didn't even touch him. It wasn't like she grabbed his hand. She just touched his robe, because if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. She has confidence because of what she's heard. And she's hoping her expectations are met, but something else happens here. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. Everybody say that word. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. There wasn't a moment, there wasn't a hesitation, there wasn't I wonder if something's going to happen. Immediately, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. How incredible. The power of Jesus for his glory. Keep going. But then as we're walking, Jesus realized at once, right then, that healing power had gone out from him. And so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" What? I love this part. His disciples are so like, just guys. You know what I'm saying? They say, his disciples are like, "Can you, bro, there's so many people here. Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, who touched me? Come on, Jesus." But what we'll find is that Jesus is a little bit different because he says this. He kept on looking around, Jesus did, to see who had done it. And then the frightened woman, you know she was freaking out. Like at that moment, like, oh no. She's frozen. She's trembling at the realization of what had happened to her because she's like, immediately she feels in her body, I'm good. I am whole. I am good. For the first time in 12 years, I am good. But Jesus didn't stop there. She came up to him and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. If I could just touch her robe, I know I'd be healed. And then this happens. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and your suffering is over." Leave this up for a second. The power Jesus has is not just one of healing the physical. It's of healing the entire person. Because this woman felt like completely nothing. And he could have called her anything. He could have been, "Julia, you're healed." He could have called her by name. He could have said, "Woman, you're healed." No. He says, "Daughter." He said, "Daughter," because he knew that's what she needed to hear. It wasn't just a physical thing, because her faith connected her to Jesus' power, but also to his heart. And what she learned in that moment, when he called her daughter, is that she learned that Jesus isn't just powerful, he's personal. He's not just powerful, he's personal. And that's not just a cute thing we say as Christians. It's a reality we live because we are the sons and daughters of a king who knows you, who loves us. She learned he isn't just powerful, he's personal. And that same faith is one that we have, one that we can have. And our faith connects us to Jesus' power as well as to his heart for you. But it's not about what you bring to him to get that. Jesus is not transactional. We don't serve a God who is transactional, and thank goodness for that. Because if we did, we don't have enough to bring. I feel like so many of us are tied up in a situation or in just a mindset of, if I'm good enough, then this will happen. If I do this, then God will give me that. How many have done this? I will never, ever do this again, God, if you do this. We live that. I've lived that. And thank God that is not how our God works. So the question I want to ask you is, what part of your life feels broken beyond repair? Like just broken beyond something that you can actually see a new vision for? Because what feels broken and irreparable is something that God cares so much about seeing whole in your life. That's what we see with this woman. He showed his power to proclaim his glory, to rewrite her story, because he's not just powerful. He's personal. That's the second story. The third story is about this man named Jairus, and he's a religious leader in the community. Think like a local church leader, right? And like I said, her story kind of fits in the middle of his. It's kind of split in the middle. And here's why I wanted to split this up for you, because it starts here in verse 21. Okay? In verse 21, Jesus got into the boat again, and he went back across the other side of the lake. So this is after he talked to the demon-possessed guy. Now he's back over here, right? So he gets in the boat. And where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. When he got out the boat, this happened. A leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. He said, "My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her, heal her so she can live," because he knows what Jesus can do. So Jesus went with them, and all the people followed, crowding around him. Okay. This piece is for you guys who've been around the church. Like maybe you volunteer, or like you've kind of got your thing, like you got kids ministry, you've got music, you got something you've done ministry with, homeless ministry, you got something, right, that you're doing ministry in. This is right after this, that when they start walking, that's when the woman comes up to him. You guys with me? That's where that story happens. If Jesus would have been so focused on what he was doing, there's a dad who's telling me his daughter's dying. I got to go. I ain't got time for you. Sometimes we're too busy doing ministry to do ministry. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes we're too busy doing ministry to do ministry. We get so caught up in the thing we're doing that we forget to take a moment for the people who are around us. And opening your eyes to the little moments that can come around, or that can happen around you as you're doing what you're doing. He was on his way to do a miracle. Jesus already knew, like, oh, you're going to see in a second. Jesus is like, she ain't dead. She's asleep. It's all good. Like, she knows I'm going to heal this girl. He knows that's what's happening. He's on his way to do that. And in the midst of that, a miracle happens, and instead of being like, I'm busy, I got some stuff to do, he gives her that moment of, oh, my daughter. Are y'all with me? Don't be too busy doing ministry to do ministry. I didn't want to miss that. That convicted me this week. This picks up in verse 35, though. So after the whole experience with the woman, it then picks, it took like such a long section from the writing that they had to remind us who this dude is. While he was still speaking with her, the woman, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They had to remind us who he was because it's been so long. They told him, your daughter's dead. Full stop. She's gone. Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, don't be afraid. Just have, everybody said, faith. Don't be afraid. Just have faith. He didn't say, don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. That's a catchphrase of mine. I say that way too much. He didn't say, don't be afraid. I've got this covered. He's talking to Jairus. He says, don't be afraid. Just have faith. Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Keeps going. What's interesting in this situation is it's gone from being difficult, she's sick, she needs help, to being like impossible, like no hope. She is dead. That's a declarative statement. Y'all with me? Like that's end of the story type stuff. But Jesus says, no, you have faith. But why can he do that? He's not fazed in the face of death because he has control. Jesus isn't even fazed by the comment that she's dead because he's in control. In fact, he tells us to have faith where he has authority. You see the connection there? He says, you have faith because I'm in control. Don't have faith because it's going to be okay, some kind of wishy-washy. You have faith because I have authority. That's what he tells his father. And then they proceed to the house in verse 38. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. It was a whole scene. And he went inside and he asked, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep. And the crowd laughed at him. Like they mocked him. They said they know better. They've seen the dead girl. They've heard that the girl is dead. They know what's going on. They laugh at him in that situation. And what Jesus does is he confronts. That's just an expression of doubt. Y'all with me? They're laughing because there's no way. Like, what are you talking about? She's just sleeping. That's stupid. This man's stupid. But he made them all leave, and he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where she was laying. And what we find is not just a moment of confronting the doubt of those in the crowd, but it's a moment of the same question we have to ask ourselves. Like, what is dead in your life? What are the things that you're considering to be completely dead, gone, hopeless, done, under the ground, buried, done? What are they? Like I was saying earlier, is it a relationship you're walking through? Is it something with your family? Is it something at work? Is it a dream that you had? A hope for the future? What is it? What is it that's completely dead in your life? Hold that thought in your mind, because this is what Jesus does with dead things. He says this. Holding her hand, he said to her, Talitha kum, which means, little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. And they were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Things that we find hopeless, situations that we find hopeless, are not final when Jesus is there. Jesus speaks life into what seems finished to us. The things that seem finished in life are not finished when Jesus has a say, because he speaks life. I ask again, what are the things that feel dead to you in your life today? Because Jesus speaks life into those moments, into the things that we feel are finished. What feels dead isn't done in the ministry of Jesus. It's not, because he breathes life. We have such a small understanding of the big picture. Like if you were to stretch your life out on like a timeline, right? The season you're in, and I think seasons are a very biblically important concept for us to understand, that like life happens in seasons, whether that's a month, 5 years, 12 years for that woman. There can be seasons that we walk through. It's an ebb and flow. It's an up and down. It doesn't always follow up, down, up, down. It could be up, up, up. Could be down, down, down. Who knows? But there are seasons that we walk through in life. Nod your head if you're with me. There are seasons we walk through. And if you look at your life on an entire timeline, right? The season you're in could be that much. And let me tell you, when you're in a difficult season, that is all you see. You can't see what comes before. You can't see what comes after. You're stuck where you are. We don't have an understanding of the big picture, but Jesus does. He seeks to remind us of what's been and of what will be and of who he is in your moment. We talked about these impossible moments of what Jesus does. In these 3 stories, he's demonstrated that power. Whether it's completely healing man from that demon infestation, whether it's breathing new life into this little girl, whether it's reminding a daughter that she's whole, not just physically, but emotionally and as a person. He displays his power, but he does it so that his glory is displayed, whether it's through the man going and preaching, or this woman being known, or this girl, what people are seeing as a result. They're amazed and they're stunned. It's to God's glory. But ultimately, it's the third piece that's true as well. It's not just the first 2. The first 2 are primary. The third piece happens as well. He seeks to rewrite our story. These are not just random stories that we have in a book that was written a long time ago. These are real people with a real Jesus. And I don't know your situation. I don't know where you're at. I don't know the season you're in. I don't know the impossible situation you're in. I don't know what feels hopeless or lost today. But what I do know is that in the midst of that chaos, in the midst of that brokenness, whatever you're experiencing, I know that same Jesus is ready to step into your story in this moment now. That same peace that man experienced is something you can experience. That healing, both inside your body or in your life, can happen as well. It's not transactional. It's about not what we bring to him so he might do something for us. He wants to bring you that peace. He wants to bring you that life into the thing that might feel dead in your life. Because that's what Jesus does. In impossible situations, he walks in and he displays his power for his glory to be shown and to rewrite your story. And he's ready to step into your story, because it's not about having enough or being enough. And I believe that I had a guy this week I was talking with, and his son has got the leukemia's back for him. And so that season is coming back again. It's another season he's walking through. They didn't see it coming. He had surgery on Friday. I've got friends who are walking through different stuff in their life. I've got stuff I'm walking through in my life. There's things that we see. There's seasons that we go through. And there's a verse that I use a lot of times, not because it's a platitude, and I probably have spoken about it here 40 times at church, but I just feel like it's such an important foundation of our faith. And it's in Romans 8, verse 28. What it doesn't say is God uses all the good things for us. He doesn't say he uses all the bad things for us. It says God uses all things for the good of those who love him. These seasons, these impossible situations that we walk through are not just so we might learn a lesson or read a story one day. It's all connected. They're meant to be for our good, so we might become more and more like Jesus. So we might heed the words of Jesus when he's talking to Jairus. And in the midst of that impossible situation, he says, don't be afraid. Just have faith. Not a hope, not a wish, not a dream, because we don't have a genie. We have a God who has proved himself over and over and over. Faithfulness, steadfastness. He has authority over all things. Our faith is a response to all of that. Don't be afraid. Just have faith. Let's pray together. God, we're grateful for your love. We're grateful for your grace, that you would see us for where we are and who we are, God, and still love us anyways. That there's nothing we can do to make you love us more. There's nothing we can do to make you love us less. And that is grace, God. God, would you remind us when we are in the midst of those difficult seasons? As we look into your word, we're reminded of real people who experienced a real Jesus that's available to us today. God, that we don't just have a hope or a fleeting dream or wish that we could be different or feel different or, God, just experience freedom or peace, but we serve a God who is close, who is not just powerful, but is personal. God, would you remind us of that? Would you remind us to stay close? Would you remind us of your scripture that tells us that you use all things for our good? Not so that we brush by the difficult things or just savor the good things, but God, so that we would have a better perspective of what you're doing in our lives. Let us see the whole picture by your grace. And as a result, we would choose to have more faith. Not fear, we would choose to have more faith because of who you are and who you continue to prove yourself to be in our lives. God, help us be more like you every single day. We're grateful. In your name we pray. Amen.